positive.
Okay, good, good. Thank you.
Okay. I'll sing you this short song, which relates to the topic of the day. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, children of her love. Every rung goes higher, higher. Every rung goes higher, higher. Every rung goes higher, higher. Children of her love. Children, do you want your freedom? Children, do you want your freedom? Children, do you want your freedom? Children of her love. Keep on climbing, you will make it. Keep on climbing, you will make it. Keep on climbing, you will make it. Children of her love. Children of his love. Children of their love. Om Amen. September is a month for the study of Bhakti Yoga. A Bhakti yogi, a bhakta, has a devotional relationship with God. This is developed over time by study, prayer, ritual, and worship. As a bhakta, you practice giving every action, thought, emotion, perception, and tendency a Godward turn. Everything you are, both positive and negative, is offered to the divine presence. Your prayer is for the carefree self-surrender of a child in its mother or father's arms, and ultimately union with your beloved. So that's what we're studying this month, and the topic for this morning is a little improvement. Pablo Casals, who lived from 1876 to 1973, was an internationally renowned cellist. For more than 50 years, he was a featured cello soloist with orchestras around the world. At age 93, Casals still practiced 3 hours a day. He was asked why. The maestro replied, "I'm beginning to show some improvement." Though his answer was light-hearted, we may believe Casals meant what he said. Perhaps Casals shed some light on Swami Vivekananda's remark, "We are infinite dreamers, dreaming finite dreams." Since Swamiji could find no line of demarcation between the finite and the infinite, he claimed that we can go on growing, improving, as long as we make the effort. If you want to read the details of what he said about this, the talks that he gave in London in 1895 are collected under the title Jnana Yoga. And you will find what he meant when he said that we can go on growing, improving, as long as we make the effort. There is no limit to the power of the human mind, he said. But what does the word effort mean? Make the effort. What does effort mean? Raja Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda, asked a visitor who had come for instruction, the visitor had come for instruction, Swami Brahmananda asked him, "Do you perform prayer and meditation nowadays?" The answer came back, "No, Maharaj, not at all." The Swami replied, "It is better to do at least a little every day. That will give you peace of mind and steadiness. Perform japa 108 or 1,000 times daily. If you're inclined to do more, you can do so, and you should. But in spite of instruction like this," Swami Vivekananda noted, "most of us make our minds like spoilt children, allowing them to do whatever they want. Practice is absolutely necessary. You may listen to me by the hour every day, but if you do not practice, you will not get one step further. It all depends on practice. Practice makes us what we shall be." Now I'm going to repeat that because that is the central theme, that practice leads to a little improvement. I'm going to repeat what the Swami said. Most of us make our minds like spoilt children, allowing them to do whatever they want. Practice is absolutely necessary. You may listen to me by the hour every day, but if you do not practice, you will not get one step further. It all depends on practice. Practice makes us what we shall be. This morning, we will explore and discuss the Bhakti Yogis' practice of study, prayer, ritual, and worship. Let's start with a working definition of the word practice. Following Raja Maharaj's lead, it means something you do at least once a day on most days. And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Practice just a little, and someone will come forward to help you." Of course, you can decide for yourself what a little is in the pattern and priorities of your everyday life. I'll repeat that. None of this is meant to be something that you should do, must do. There is no dogma. There is no doctrine here. There are only the suggestions and advice of the great souls, and as best as we can interpret them. So I'll say again, of course, you can decide for yourself what a little is in the pattern and priorities of your everyday life, if you decide to do it at all. Yet, both Sri Ramakrishna and Raja Maharaj used that term. Is there any way to know what they meant by a little? Raja Maharaj said to someone just starting a practice, perform japa 108 or 1,000 times daily. At about 1 repetition per second, that 108 to 1,000 works out to between 2 and 17 minutes. And as always, Raja Maharaj would tell you what he believed you could gain by this, 2 to 17 minutes. That will give you peace of mind and steadiness. Maharaj said, a great grace in itself and the necessary, that this will give you peace of mind and steadiness, Maharaj said. A great grace in itself, peace of mind and steadiness, and the necessary dependable foundation for further growth. Sri Ramakrishna offers this hint. He said, I have done the full 16 annas. You have only to do one. Now, this is in the gospel. This is in the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, so we may understand it is instruction meant for us. That's why the master left the gospel. That's the understanding. He said that Mahendranath Gupta was his instrument. And the master himself, long after he had left the body, helped M. Mahendranath, helped M assemble the gospel and get every word correct. The master would correct him when M's memory wasn't precisely correct. He would say, no, if you remember, I said it just this way. And so M would correct the copy that he was writing. So we may think that what Sri Ramakrishna said is instruction meant for us. It may be useful to think of what he said this way. At the time we meet with him in the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna is immersed. We meet with the master in about 1882. He lived to 1886. So it's about 4 or 5 years that we come to know the master through the gospel. So it may be useful to think of what he said in this way. At the time we meet with him in the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna is immersed in the divine presence 24 hours a day. If we think of that as the full 16 annas, then 1/16 of that is 1.5 hours a day. 24 divided by 16 is 1.5. So we have Raja Maharaja's suggestion of 2 to 17 minutes practice a day for a beginner, and perhaps Sri Ramakrishna's gesture toward what may be meant by a little for the more advanced bhakta. This 1.5 hours a day, is that to be spent on the cushion, practicing meditation? For most of us, probably not. Let's review the definition of bhakti yoga. A bhakti yogi, bhakta, has a devotional relationship with God. This is developed over time by study, prayer, ritual, and worship. As a bhakta, you practice giving every action, thought, emotion, perception, and tendency a Godward turn. Everything you are, both positive and negative, is offered to the divine presence. Your prayer is for the carefree self-surrender of a child in its mother's or father's arms, and ultimately union with your beloved. Before we go into the definition of these particular parts of practice, let's take a few minutes to discuss this, answer any questions you may have. This is how we study the art of spirituality together. So please, if you have any questions so far, if you have any comments to make, please share them with us, because this is a congregation. This is a sangha. And we gain by your sharing with us who you are and how what is said affects you and what it gives rise to you and gives rise to in you. So please, anyone, a question, a comment?
The Shankara,
Yes, Sham.
uh, what I feel is, if you do sometimes, you tend to be more mechanical in doing these things, japa and all that. So is that good or bad or?
Holy Mother, is that all the question, Sham?
Yeah,
Or is there more?
yeah, that's all.
Holy Mother said even mechanical has benefit. If you can bring your attention to it so that you feel it, you actually feel the japa, you actually feel the mantra in your heart, then there's that much more benefit, of course. There's a relationship, a nearness. You can read about this in chapter 12 of the Gita. The chapter is the yoga of devotion. But Holy Mother was very explicit. Even mechanical repetition is better than not. And Sri Ramakrishna once jokingly teased Balaram's father. You may remember that Balaram Bose was Sri Ramakrishna's very devoted student. As Sri Ramakrishna spent a lot of time in Balaram's home. And sometimes when the master was there, Balaram's father would also be there. He traveled a great deal because he had estates all over India, but or northern India anyway. So one time Balaram's father was there, and he always was making japam on his beads. He was very pious in that way. And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Oh, there's Balaram's father making japa on his beads." He said, "But for Balaram's father, what would take Balaram a year will take his father a year and a half," gesturing toward the fact that Balaram's father was doing this mechanically. So there again is the master's assertion that even mechanical repetition. And part of japam is learning to train the mind. It's part of the ritual part of a bhakta's practice. It's part of the ritual and the worship. And the training of the mind, when we catch ourselves being mechanical, we return our attention to the mantra. And then the mind slips away again. It's the nature of the mind. And then we bring it back. And we mustn't be impatient with ourselves. It's simply the nature of the mind to be influenced. Actually, it is an artifact. It is a creation of the gunas. And so it naturally slips away. Over time, if you continually pull your mind back to the mantra, what happens is you find that two things happen. First of all, your attention stays with it for much longer periods of time because the breath slows, and breath is associated with thoughts, so there are fewer thoughts. And secondly, you find that the mantra begins to be in your mind all the time. So when you're doing something and your mind is just calm for a moment, or just not distracted for a moment, you'll find, oh, the mantra is running in the background. So there's great benefit to doing the japam. Mother said, repeating the name will make your heart as pure as a star.
Thank you. Thank you very much for encouraging.
Anyone else? Anything at all?
Hi, Brother Shankara. This is Michaeli Cachet
Hello,
again.
Michaeli. Very good to hear from
Hi.
you.
Nice to be here. Isn't it kind of when you do the mantra, especially the repetition, it's widening like the gaps between the thoughts, the spaces is widening within the mind, because the mantra, the higher level of the mantra is that it takes you to that space of timelessness where you're one with the creator.
You're absolutely right, Michaeli. You're absolutely right. The nature of existence is vibration. The mantra is a very special vibration. It has the capacity to, as you say, widen the gap between thoughts. And that has a very physical representation. The breath slows, may even stop. And as you say, because it is a vibration associated with higher states of consciousness, the higher states of consciousness are materialized, so to speak, in the mantra, then it draws you toward that. It invites the kundalini to rise through the spiritual centers to the heart center and then even above. So yes, you're absolutely right. And thanks for bringing that up. That is exactly right.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? This is good.
Brother Shankar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well, Bhagirath.
I was thinking along the same lines that you so lucidly brought up, that the way our body, mind, and the brain are constructed, it needs repetition. It's not that repetition is desirable, it is needed. This is the reason why Shankaracharya says, Etat chintaya varam varam. Varam means over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the reason why the vaccines have to be given repeatedly, because the body forgets what to do to a particular stimulus. So it has to be done again. And the same thing, for example, Pavlov and his famous experiment with the dog, he had to ring the bell to produce secretion in the dog over and over again. And then the dog runs the trick. So in addition to what Sham said, yes, a mindless repetition may not do the trick that well, in the sense that every once in a while, from mindlessness, you have to go to a mindful repetition.
Yes.
Because ceaselessly mindless, you may do it for 1,000 years and it will not make any difference. But in between, if your mind wakes up to pick up the link, the vibrations that you're talking about, those vibes do not go away. And that's the way I feel.
Well, Holy Mother was very clear that even what you referred to as mindless repetition has a benefit, because the vibration is there. The vibration is there, and slowly it will work its wonder. So of course it's better to be mindful. But if we think about the nature of universe, everything is repetitive. The actions of our body are repetitive. The actions of the earth are repetitive. It spins on its axis once of what we call a day. We have our seasons. It goes around the sun once every 365 days approximately. Over and over, these patterns repeat. So we are best served by cooperating with those repetitive patterns, as you just pointed out, Bhagirath. Thank you. Anyone else?
Brother Shankara.
Yes, please.
The saints and prophets of the various world's traditions seem to fit the definition of today's topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Say it again, please. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning.
The saints and prophets of the various world traditions seem to fit the definition of today's topic, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, yes, if you read the book Love Poems from God, for example, that represents these soaring and beautiful songs and poems by 12 of the world's great saints, you find that they practiced repetitively for many years. It's partly described in their biographies, the little biographies that precede their works, and partly described by them themselves, that they did not jump from square one to the goal. They worked at it. They worked at it. But once, it's like St. Catherine of Siena says, we know nothing until we know everything. We know nothing until we know everything. And the Sufis say, you cannot achieve the goal by practice, but you cannot achieve the goal without practice. So there's a component of grace, but grace is not indefinable and unattainable. As Sri Ramakrishna said, the breeze of grace, of divine grace, the breeze of grace is always blowing. You have only to raise your sails. Raising your sails is practice. And knowing how to raise your sails so that they catch the breeze is practice. Anyone who's ever sailed a boat will tell you that it takes long practice before you become truly skilled at raising your sails and trimming them in such a way and to achieve the maximum effect from the breezes that are blowing. So yes, absolutely. And all of them, I'll read a poem by St. Catherine of Siena at the end of this. All of them talk about the fact that grace is there, but that somehow we have to do a little something to bring ourselves in tune with that. Thank you for that.
That's beautiful. Brother Shankara, I just want to say, because you mentioned Catherine of Siena, that made me think about, I used to volunteer years ago with the Sisters of Mother Teresa in Tijuana, Mexico. And it was so beautiful to be with them because I was able to see their life, and their whole day was set as like a prayer to God. And there's a timing involved and a relationship with the planet and the vibration of the planet. And it's also, I think it's, I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but it's a 7-year training period for the new Sisters of Mother Teresa. So that experience in my life as a volunteer was truly a blessing. And I would say that because you mentioned Catherine of Siena, and then the musician that the talk was about in the beginning for 3 years training, that doing the mantra is a process. It's like the song that you sang at the beginning on Jacob's ladder. It's a process of going up the rungs of the ladder, and it's not anything that's instantaneous.
No, absolutely. And that 7-year period of training is to bring a mind that is not trained into a routine, a pattern. We'll talk about the necessity of that, so that each day is most productive, not in the sense that we think of in our consumer society, but productive of a state of being that can lead you to sainthood. And if you study Mother Teresa of Calcutta's life, you will find that it was not an easy thing. It was not an easy thing. She struggled with her mind, with her health, with the organization of the order that she founded. Hard work. But she believed herself to be motivated by and serve in the service of the divine in the form of human beings. And so it made her so remarkable. So remarkable. There have been these modern saints. Saint Teresa of Calcutta, Padre Pio. So it isn't something that just happened centuries ago. They are emerging now as well.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Thank you, Michele. Anything else?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Uma,
may I share something?
please.
Thinking of mechanical japa, I think there is a distinction. Some people may have so deeply internalized bhakti or the mood of prayer. They are so much into it that they don't have to make any effort. So some mechanical sounding japa can also be automatic or spontaneous, what you call overflow of powerful emotion. Like you don't have to make an effort, in the sense that just when you love driving, you don't have to pay attention to steering every time. You just drive because you know it. You know the thing inside. So that's the kind of mechanical, it looks mechanical, but because you are so good at it, that you don't have to make an extra effort. So that's my take on some.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right. What Pablo Casals was practicing 3 hours a day was not, and at age 93 was not the scales.
Yes.
But no musician ever learned to play the cello or the piano or anything without mechanically over and over and over
Yes.
learning how to do the scales,
Yes.
and then the variations on the scales, and then the etudes that have to do with how to use the scales, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So all of these things, it is a progression. It is a progression that yields over time a little improvement, a little improvement, a little improvement.
Yes. Yes.
And so you're absolutely right. The master at anything makes it looks effortless.
Yes. Yes.
I can remember the first time I saw really masterful skiers. This was in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Germany. People who, these were Olympic quality skiers. And I'd never skied before in my life. I thought, oh, that looks easy.
No.
Oh, how many times I ended up on my fanny before I could do a proper snowplow, you know.
I gave up.
So you know, but ultimately, you know, with a little work, learning to ski came. Never to that level.
And second,
So it requires our effort. That's the thing. The effort must be there. This is what Vivekananda points out. If our minds are not to be like spoilt children, we must make an effort to bring them into alignment with something else. If we wish. Anything else before we go on? Okay.
Shankaraji,
Yes, Balakrishna.
how are you, sir?
I'm really quite well.
I think even I agree with you. It is, in the beginning, it is effort. And as you keep doing, we might feel mechanical, but there is a difference. It gives you even that mechanical way of doing things. You get some kind of a stir that is a pleasant stir in the heart. And there is no way I can explain it, but you do feel it. Even though in the beginning you might think it is mechanical, it changes that mechanical aspect into something else.
Yes, indeed, Balakrishna. Yes, indeed. And to anyone who's ever felt that stir in the heart, you do not have to explain it. That is what happens. That is what Swami Prabhupada meant by learn to feel the living presence. You feel the living presence in your heart by calling on its name, and it was always there, but it was not evident to you. As your practice goes on and on, it becomes more and more self-evident until the word self becomes the important word. And then the need for even the word evident falls away. There's just a sense of the self. Thank you, Bala. So I'm going to go on to these elements of the Bhakta's practice, which are study, prayer, ritual, and worship, and a Godward turn. Study, what we mean by a Bhakta's study, is not just reading and hearing. Yes, we do the reading and hearing, but then having heard what we've heard from the instruction, we compare that with how we think, how we behave. As Patanjali puts it in the Yoga Sutra, we replace a lower samskara with a higher samskara. We begin to understand what is meant by yoga is stilling the thought waves of the mind. But when we first start, we have no idea what that means. So we hear, we listen, we read, but it isn't just about learning stuff and filing it away. No, that won't avail us anything. As Vivekananda said, you can listen to me by the hour, but unless you practice, you won't get one step further. So the practice is comparing what you've heard, that the self is in all beings. We hear this from Yajnavalkya, and we hear it in the Devi Mahatmyam and so on, that the self or the mother is the essence and soul of all beings. But we don't see that. So what do we first do? We take a stand for it. All right, I don't see it, but I'm going to have a working faith that is true. And I'm going to begin to behave as if the self is what is present in all beings. And what does that mean? I give that person, that thing, dignity. I give it respect. I give it service. So first we hear or read, then we compare. And after we work the comparison for some time, we begin to assimilate the teaching, and we do begin to see it. We begin to, as Balakrishna just said, the mantra is no longer just a mechanical repetition. It's a feeling, a stirring in the heart. So that's what's meant by study. Prayer. Now, there are many, many different kinds of prayer. There is mechanical prayer. There is petitionary prayer. But what is meant in the context of a bhakta's practice? Prayer is pouring out your heart, pouring out to your heart, to God. Saying, "Oh Lord, I yearn to see your splendor. I yearn to see your beauty. I yearn to see evidence of your presence everywhere." And this may lead to tears. Sri Ramakrishna says that the most effective prayer, and so do all these great saints in love poems from God, say that the tears, when we actually stir ourselves, the bhakta's path is an emotional path. And so when we stir ourselves to the point where we really are being honest with ourselves and with the divine through prayer, there will be tears. And Saint Catherine of Siena says that this does indeed get God's attention. The third component is ritual. There are two aspects to ritual that I'll point out. First, having a routine so that you begin each day and perhaps even end each day with a routine of spiritual practice. That's one aspect of ritual, that you ritualize your day by making it a priority to start, and as I say, perhaps end the day also with formal spiritual practice. The other aspect of ritual is what we're familiar with in what we do at the shrine. We may light a candle, we may wave the candle in front of the images and say a mantra. Just say Jai Shri, whatever it is, Jai Shri Ganesha, Jai Om Namah Shivaya, Jai Shri Ramakrishna. Then we light some incense, we ring a bell. What is the purpose of these things? To train the mind, to train the mind. Swami Prabhavananda used to say to the initiates, these new people that were coming on to be monastics, he would say, "You're going to learn how to do the worship." And they'd say, "Oh, Swami, I'm not temperamentally inclined to that." He says, "It doesn't matter whether you're temperamentally inclined, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the worship. It has to do with training your mind." Just what Michele was talking about earlier with the nuns of St. Teresa of Calcutta. There is that component of taking your mind from its present condition and training it. As Vivekananda says, education is the training of the nerves. And then he also said, education is nothing more than the manifestation of the perfection already within. When the mind is trained and the distractions are less, the perfection already within spontaneously manifests. So that's why there is a ritual component to the bhaktas practice, to train the mind away from the things that normally occupy our time at the beginning and the end of the day to these other things that slowly and slowly through this little practice, bring the mind under control. Worship. Now this is the key component. It makes the others all real when you discover a worshipful attitude. A worshipful attitude is finding and practicing reverence. Many of you have heard me tell the story of Sri Ramakrishna and this local farmer who had heard that Sri Ramakrishna was a holy man who worshipped all the gods and goddesses, and the man came to him and said, not defiantly or truculently, but just matter-of-factly, I find no attraction to any form or formless aspect of God. Nothing whatsoever. And I've looked at many, has attracted my attention, my heart. And Sri Ramakrishna asked him one simple question. Well, what do you love? And the farmer was kind of taken aback, but he thought a minute and he said, well, I've raised this goat from the time it was just tiny, and now it's an adult goat, and I truly love that goat. And Sri Ramakrishna then gave him one simple instruction. Well, then worship the goat. After 3 years, the farmer returned to him with tears running down his face and said, now I understand. What did he understand? Yajnavalkya in the Big Forest Upanishad, the Brihadaranya Upanishad, teaches us that the reason we love anything at all is not for the sake of the thing itself. The reason we love anything at all is not for the sake of the thing itself. It is for the sake of the self, capital S self, that is manifesting that thing. That is the reason for that thing's existence. You can read Yajnavalkya in his conversation with his wife Maitreyi, in which he goes into great detail about this. It is not for the sake of the wife that the husband loves the wife, but for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the husband that the wife loves the husband. It is for the sake of the self. And so it was not for the sake of the goat that the farmer loved the goat. It was for the sake of the self. And he discovered that. And that's why he came back to Sri Ramakrishna with the tears streaming down his face and said, now I understand. So worship is finding that within yourself that you love, that you revere, and doing whatever form of worship appeals to you, is workable for you, whether it be formal ritual worship, whether it be some simple set of prayers, whether it be in the form of devoted and loving service to that, whatever it is that you love. worship. Because it is in this that we truly find the key, which is that relationship with the self. And I mentioned the term earlier, taking a stand for. The fifth component here is giving everything a Godward turn. This is a term of Swami Prabhavananda, my teacher. Give everything a Godward turn, he said. Now I'll give you an illustration of how a little light came on for me. I read of Holy Mother and her niece and her niece's mother going to the temple, a nearby temple near Jairambati, and offering their fingernail clippings and the hair that had been cut from their hair when they had a haircut. And when I first thought of that, when I first heard of that, I thought, what an odd cultural custom, to go and offer these things. No, it was giving even that, even the humble thing of cutting your fingernails and cutting your hair, a Godward turn. You offer everything, even something as humble as that, to the divine. Now, there are other aspects to this that have to do with protection and so on, because these things, it said, can be used if anyone gets their hands on them. They can manipulate you with them and so on. I don't think that had anything to do with what Mother was doing. So everything in your life, when you wake up in the morning, you give the day a Godward turn by offering it. And Krishna, Sri Krishna, in chapters 3 through 6 of the Gita, gives us very detailed instructions, particularly in chapter 3, about how to go about offering everything. So you then get up and you do your morning ritual of getting yourself ready for the day. Wash your face, brush your teeth, whatever it is that you do, you offer that as well. And then you have a cup of coffee. Well, you offer that. You offer all of this. You give it a Godward turn. And you can, as you go on, you'll find all kinds of ways in your own life and with your own wonderful, brilliant creativity to give things a Godward turn. Now, I'm not going to go back and read that paragraph from Swami Vivekananda about practice, because we're running long. But it sounds like this should be that this could be difficult. It's not meant to be difficult. It's meant to be according to your capacity, according to your desire, according to your priorities. So listen to this very sweet poem from Saint Catherine of Siena. It's titled Rest in Prayer. The sun hears the fields talking about effort, and the sun smiles and whispers to me, why don't the fields just rest? For I am willing to do everything to help them grow. Rest, my dears, in prayer. I'll read it again. Rest in prayer. The sun hears the fields talking about effort, and the sun smiles and whispers to me, why don't the fields just rest? For I am willing to do everything to help them grow. Rest, my dears, in prayer. But notice that we are to rest in prayer. We are to rest in relationship with the divine. So it's just 12:01. When I'm saying we were running long, I meant if we're going to have any time for more of our precious discussion and questions and answers and sharing, please, now is the time to do it. Now is the time to share yourself with us and speak up. Any question, comment, discussion?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, please.
peace. I would just like to say that I enjoyed the talk this morning
Good.
and happy to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you here too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Anyone else?
Brother Shankara?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Paul.
Yeah, I recognize your voice, Paul. How are you?
Good, good. I've missed seeing you and the gang, for the last month,
Well,
on these Sunday mornings.
yes.
But this something that I just am curious how you see this, but when you talk about being I love that story about the man that was devoted to the goat.
Mhm.
Okay, I think you shared aspects of that a month or two ago, and that really opened that up for me, that it could be how non-dogmatic that is, and this thing with the even the fingernail clippings, or the things that we would consider it insulting to give someone your fingernail clippings,
Yeah.
or in in the tradition that I have come out of, it would be considered idolatrous, or to worship a heathen idol. And that's from Rudyard Kipling. I'm sure you know that.
Oh, yeah.
And I really, but that idea of worshiping, the pig or the goat, or some people, we spend more money on our veterinary services, on our house pets, than many of the third world countries have for their entire budget.
Yes.
So is there any edge? Do you see any, I guess, that idea of, the idolatrous ultimate concern versus an ultimate concern that is truly the object of your ultimate concern is truly ultimate?
There is no call to worship. There is no dogma. Nothing is being imposed on anyone from here or from this tradition about worshiping any idol or any image. The idea is to find the self within yourself. Having found the self within yourself, you will see it elsewhere. But the way it worked for this farmer is he found it in himself and in everything else after he found it in the goat. So the goat wasn't an idol. The goat was just what he loved. So yes, it's an object. Well, everything except there's only one subject. That's the divine presence. Everything else is object. And so we can deal with that intellectually however we wish. But intellectually, as was pointed out, intellectually, the life of the mind is an exitless maze. The life of the mind, my mind of learning and intellect is an exitless maze. And so we must find these other aspects of ourselves, which are called the heart, which are called the soul, which are called the self. These are the aspects through which there is an opening. And if you want to understand what is meant by that in a most profound way from a Western perspective, read Jill Bolte Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she lost all of her left mind function and came to know there was this entire other aspect of herself represented by which she called the heart or the right mind, right hemisphere, that was absolutely wondrous, but was entirely masked by her left mind awareness, which was so trained to be confrontational, competitive, all the things that a top-level academic would do. She was a Harvard-trained and Harvard-practicing neuroanatomist. So there is this other aspect to ourselves. And that is what we must find, however we may find it. We've been talking about the Bhakta's path today. Next month we'll talk about the karma path, the karma yogi's path. And then of the Raja Yogi's path, and then the Jnana Yogi. There are these four paths that Swami Vivekananda taught. We've started now on a journey toward the heart. And next week's talk is titled Where There Is Love. So thanks for bringing that up, Paul, and I hope that was not too rambling an answer.
No, thank you for your very thoughtful response. I appreciate it. And just one self-disclosure is I know yesterday my wife and I drove up to a place called Indian Seats. I don't know how many of you heard of that. It's Indian Seats. It's only about 35 miles northwest of here, and it's an absolute breathtaking view when you hike up to the top of that. I guess it's a mountain, and it's called Indian Seats. And probably one of the most touching things I saw there was at the overlook where you really can just see vastly into the distance. There was some squirrel that had become tamed by people feeding it nuts. And it was kind of coming right up to people, a little white-bellied squirrel. And it was so cute and touching to see that not being afraid to come right up to human beings. And anyway, I won't say any more about that, but I just wanted to share that as also if people want to get out of the house, that Indian Seats is a beautiful hike. It's about 2 miles each way in and out. And I think I think anyone would greatly enjoy that. And thank you for being.
Paul. And thank you for mentioning squirrel, because it reminds me of something I intended to talk about. There is the next edition of American Vedantist is about to be published. It's edited here. It's issue number 77. This is quite an old publication. And it has a charming, charming story. The first chapter, the introduction was in the last issue. And now the first chapter of something called The Legend of Shuido, which is written by a woman who was raised in Colombia. And one of the principal characters of this legend of Shuido is a squirrel, a beautiful squirrel, and named Ardiananda. Ardia is Spanish for squirrel. Ananda, of course, is blissful, blissful squirrel. And so I hope all of you who haven't already signed on to receive American Vedantist will consider it. Just go to americanvedantist.org, take a look at what you see there, and if you like what you see, sign up for a subscription. It's free. There's no charge. But I will just say Uma has a charming piece in it. She throws down the gauntlet at this virus, defiantly saying, "We will not be mastered by this." So it's a charming piece by Uma Majumdar. And there's other things in it that are equally compelling. So that's my little commercial for American Vedantist. Anything else?
Brother Shankar,
Yes, Bhagarat.
there are two things. The moment you mentioned squirrel, the tale in Ramayana goes that when Rama was trying to build a bridge over the ocean, he took the help of everyone, including the monkeys and everything, but there was a squirrel. He says, I also can bring some pebbles for you to make the bridge.
Yes.
And as a token of appreciation, Rama touched upside down the body of squirrel in the stripes that you see on the body of the squirrel. If you go to India, they would say they are the finger marks of Rama.
Yes, the two white stripes down the back, the spine of the squirrel.
Yes.
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 They are where Rama petted the squirrel. This is the wonderful little story. It's in Valmiki's Ramayana.
It is my brother.
Thank you, Bhagarat. Yes, the squirrel is there are at least two poems in that book, Love Poems from God. One by Saint Francis of Assisi and the other perhaps by Rumi, that feature a squirrel. I think there's a third one also. They're very companionable creatures.
Very, yes.
Anyone else? Anything else?
The video.
All right, then we'll close. And we'll close with this. Oh, dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om, Amen. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us, and to all joyous and suffering beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. So good to be back with you after the August break.
See?
So good to see so many of you here. And the next opportunity for us to be together will be Monday evening if you choose to join us for the reading and discussion group of the Love Poems from God. The decision has been made to just start at the beginning of the book and read the biography, the little biography of a Sufi saint named Rabia, a woman, and then some of her poems, and we'll just go straight through the book. It'll be a joy. And then, of course, there's the Tuesday night class on the Mother, the Wednesday night class on Bhagavad Gita, and the Saturday morning class on the book Realizing God, a collection of Swami Prabhavananda's talks from 1938 to 1976. And then, as I said, next Sunday, the talk is Where There Is Love. Oh, and let's not forget, any of you who wish to participate in the Labor Day reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you'll find ways to participate in that, either by emailing me or going on the Facebook page and finding the link to sign up for Swami Sarvadevananda's register in Hollywood. So, Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. Go in Mother's loving and protective embrace.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. Everybody have a great weekend.
See you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, brother, and everyone else. Thank you.
See you again soon.
Take care.
We'll go to Indian seats. Okay.
Bring some nuts with you if you go on that hike that I told you about.
I will go.
All right. Bye-bye all.